If you're like me, you might hear estate planning and go, ugh, gross. You might think to yourself, I'm not sure why I'd bother with that. Estate planning is only for the uber rich.
Tallgrass begs to differ. Tallgrass founding attorneys Laurel and Riley think everyone should have an estate plan. They know estate planning seems untouchable to a lot of folks, like something you have to do inside a stuffy law firm of Stuffy McLawyer Pants Esquire.
But I promise you, Tallgrass is nothing like that. For one, they work out of their home so their clients can feel at home. They obsess, because they're nerds, over making clients feel like they belong and are supposed to be there. Also, their kids might make an appearance. They will take time to answer all of your questions, even the uncomfortable ones. They will work relentlessly to make sure your plan's exactly what you need to feel secure and at peace.
So if you've been putting off planning for what's going to happen after you've gone, it's time for you to give Tallgrass a call at 918-770-8940 and start your plan today. Or visit their website at tallgrassestatePlanning.com and schedule a free initial consultation. For free! It's right there on the website.
And of course, there's more, because this is a podcast ad. If you tell them you're a Pod for Good listener, they're going to take 25% off their service fees. Just tell them Pod for Good sent you. Stop thinking estate planning isn't for you and give Tallgrass a call today at 918-770-8940 or on their website, which I'm not going to read out to you again. It's in our show notes. Thank you, Tallgrass. Welcome to another episode of Pod for Good, a podcast where we learn from those doing good in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the world, why they care, what we can do, and most importantly, what you, the listeners, can do. Pod for Good is produced and edited by Pod for Good Media and can be found anywhere you get your podcasts. I am, as always, your chief philanthropod and class clown for not thinking too hard about the Dogman books, Jesse Ulrich.
And I am your vice admiral philanthropod and class clown of the literacy wars, Chris Miller.
And today our guests are Olivia Martin, executive director of Reading Partners, and Lisa Schatz, executive director of Gaining Ground.
We talked to Olivia and Lisa about what they see as the barriers to education. We talk about how Reading Partners and Gaining Ground are helping kids learn to read in different and interesting ways. And finally, we talk about how to stop the summer slide.
Enjoy. We are very excited to have Lisa and Olivia on the podcast today. Olivia and Lisa, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us today.
We're recording this on January 6th, so for our listeners, we are all very cold. And if you live in Oklahoma, actually, if you live anywhere, you will know it's really cold out there. So the middle part of the country is learning about polar vortexes, which I learned about in Boston, and they are terrifying and scary. But we're all warm, we're all happy, and today's episode is going to be mostly about literacy, about reading. So I think what we'll do first is let you both sort of describe what your organizations do. We'll start with Lisa, who's sitting in front of me. Can you tell us more about Gaining Ground?
I'd love to. Yes. Gaining Ground was developed because both Kirby and Kirby is my partner and co-founder. We were in the classroom for 15 years together, and I was an instructional coach and a literacy specialist. And what we noticed was our kids were sliding back every summer due to lack of access to books. So over the course of 5 years and a couple of grants for our school, we put together a program that really stopped the summer slide of reading skills because we were providing access to books for all of our kids. And things happened and we were moving schools and we thought, we feel like we have the solution to summer slide. Let's start Gaining Ground. And so we really started as a program that wanted to give access to books for kids in underserved areas. And over the course of the last 7 years, we could stop the summer slide. Kids that came to our book bus 5 or more times over the summer, based on pre and post assessments, did not slide back. And so most of them grew as readers. And then we thought, okay, well, now we have to close the gap. These kids are so far behind from so many years of lack of access to books. Let's start a literacy program. So we implemented a project-based learning program where kids are engaged. And so we have after-school programs, and we also have a family engagement program where we bring families in and they write together, read together, create together, and all of this to build wonderful literacy habits in their home.
That's amazing. Olivia?
So, Reading Partners is celebrating its 11th year in Tulsa. It is part of a national nonprofit that's about 25 years old that started in California with two moms who wanted to make sure that students in under-resourced environments had access to all of the literacy support they needed. And we've had the privilege of serving this year in 26 local elementary schools in both Tulsa Public Schools and Union Public Schools. And we have the privilege of bringing a science of reading curriculum into the schools during the school day. And we recruit and train community volunteers to do that tutoring with us. And that's so important, even in thinking about what Lisa's saying about all the ways that we needed to engage with students in the community, families, to also be able to bring in teachers, principals, and sometimes parents, sometimes people who live in the neighborhood or someone at a local house of worship who really wants to pour into that school, that we are able to train tutors who both bring the curriculum to students twice a week when they're pulled from their class to work just on that. But then they also get that mentorship of that one-on-one instruction. And it really does pay great dividends for the same challenges that Lisa's talking about with students, just especially post-COVID, trying to make up some ground. And just because we don't always have the same resources all across the city, that we can really share books, share literacy resources, and partner with other great organizations to do that.
So literacy in schools is one of those problems where you're like, okay, like I would like to break this down for people. There's so many things we could point to, but if you had to just choose sort of one, what is sort of the biggest challenge in teaching students between first grade and fifth grade to read?
Just one challenge.
So I'll phrase it this way: if you can't think of just one, like let's go through them, because they're like, it's one of those things where even if you mention one, you're like, well, actually, this other one's more important. And so like, what are the issues?
We can go back and forth.
Yes, I would start just from my experience in the classroom, and I think lack of resources at home. So, for a lack of a better word, poverty, I think, is a major issue in schools.
Mm-hmm. And just having grown up in Oklahoma and been a product of public schools and all the ways that we all want to believe in and support public education and know its value, we do live in a state that has historically not elevated the teaching profession and compensated professionals for that work at the level of some of our regional neighbors. So it's not only a lack of resources in the community at large, but also in many of our schools where teachers do not have the supports that they need. Principals don't have the supports that they need, both monetary and training and things like that. So just making sure that students have every possible thing they need while they're at school, and also supplementing things at home after school. And so we just have a lot of gaps in our education approach in Oklahoma, our funding streams for those things, and the disparity between and among sources of funding for different districts and programs. All those things are contributors, I think.
Well, to piggyback on that, teacher retention, which plays into everything that Olivia said, funding and lack of professional development, and just everything that goes into the teacher world in Oklahoma right now. We're losing teachers by the droves. And so what's happening is we have schools that go all year with a substitute. And so when we look at that bigger issue, the responsibility of growing readers isn't necessarily, it's not the school's fault or the teacher's fault. It is a funding fault. That's where we need to go, is more funding for schools.
And also just a more education friendly, and just the growth of being a reader and what reading means for democracy, what it means for civic engagement, what it means for workforce development. I mean, all the things that we are trying to pour in and support and come around with all of our organizations and other partner organizations that Lisa and I get to work alongside. We're not only setting up students and families for success in the short term, but when we build up their literacy in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, everything looks different for them and their families in the future. And that's what gives me encouragement around recruiting volunteers and recruiting people as you do, to commit their summers to supporting students and really working with teachers to build that summer program and after school program, is that we are creating a better community for the future because we cared about literacy. And it's not, like Lisa said, it's not a teacher's entire responsibility. It's not a school's entire responsibility. It's all of our responsibilities as citizens, as parents. As my child is about to graduate from high school, that doesn't mean I don't have a responsibility to every student in our region to make sure that they have everything they need to be the strong readers, that the future will be open to them because we poured into them. So we need a lot more excitement to just in our community around what reading means for people and what it creates for the future. And even though I don't like to just think in terms of economics, if I want to have a business 20 years from now, I want to be able to recruit a wonderful workforce from our community because of what happened in our public schools.
So I know that generally with these programs, you're targeting kids of a very specific age group, so that because literacy is a compounding issue. So can you talk a little bit about why you target that age and what the downstream impact is if they're not able to reach a certain reading level?
Well, we find that, and I think Olivia too, in all of her work, is that it is much easier to catch a first grader up or a second grader up than a fifth grader. Mm-hmm. And as a fourth and fifth and sixth grade classroom teacher, I make great gains with my students, but they still did not reach on-level achievement. And so when we start in these early grades and this early literacy, they, even with all of their gaps that they come to school with, it is more manageable to catch them up in a faster amount of time.
Well, at Reading Partners, we talk a lot about through fourth grade, you are still learning to read. The process of reading and how you put sounds together and how you decode words and those kinds of things. And then after that, you really need to be a competent, fluent reader to take advantage of all the other curriculum. After that point, I'm going to be reading for science and I'm going to be reading for math and social studies. And so if we can really focus all of our attention in the elementary grades from every direction and all of our different partners in the city, we're going to be able to set those children up for future success in all of their academics. And that leads to high school graduation and admission and persistence in college and all those kinds of things. But if we don't help set that foundation early, then there really are going to be a lot of challenges that are hard to overcome in those later years of school.
When I was younger, my mom created an environment that made me excited to read, right? That was a big thing for me. So I was reading books above my grade at a younger age because I wanted to read. So how do you create that excitement level around reading so kids want to read?
I'll jump in on this one. So our whole mission is to create excitement around reading. So we have a beautiful brand new book bus that is filled with engaging, culturally relevant books that kids can see themselves in and they get to choose. And so we build these home libraries through not only our free book fairs. So in all of our partner schools, we hold a scholastic book fair, and 4,300 kids get to choose 10 new books every May to take home to begin reading for the summer. And then we bring our book bus through all of the neighborhoods every single week to give them more books. We don't want any of the books back. They're all theirs. And we have families requesting beanbags so that they can create an engaging space for all of the books and all their children in their home. They ask, we give out prizes. We ask kids to read and write about reading. When we pull up to a neighborhood, we have music, popsicles, and bubbles at every single stop. And kids come running towards our bus every single stop. And that bleeds over into our after-school program. We have a very engaging curriculum that kids are on field trips. They are reading and writing and learning, and they're solving a community issue. We worked with the animal rescue groups last semester, and every school, all 7 schools, created a solution to the unhoused dog problem in North Tulsa. And we presented that to some of the organizations. So they're invested in their learning. They get to choose what they learn. They get to choose their books. And that is what engagement is. And so often, kids are prescribed books to read.
Mm-hmm.
And just like adults, we don't want to read books that somebody just hands us.
Yeah.
And if that book doesn't resonate with me, or it doesn't have a character that I relate to, or a situation I relate to, I'm not going to be engaged. Yeah. And so that is, I think we have to create an environment of choice. We have to create an environment where kids see themselves in books, and that the books are windows and mirrors and doors to the future for them. Or they're not going to grow as readers if they don't have those opportunities.
Where did I hear about a program where, maybe it was here in town, where kids were reading to pets, were reading to animals?
Is that the SPCA maybe?
Maybe, yeah. Somewhere like a way to help kids get confidence is reading aloud to puppies. Yes. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea.
And that serves everyone's
That
goals,
does, yeah.
right?
That makes everyone happy.
Yes. That was one of our tasks in our unit of study. They all sent pictures and wrote about and talked about reading to their pets.
That's adorable.
Yeah. I mean, not that the pets understand what's going on at all, but it's still sweet and wonderful.
And the pets understand the love of it.
They understand the love. Yes.
So it really does contribute to the entire community. I've had the privilege of attending Gaining Ground summer closing, what you call it, your showcase. And you really get to see everything that Lisa's talking about with students who have been working on songs and working on arts and being in teams and with certain adults leading them in the summer, and how much fun it is to get to show their parents and their grandparents and their friends all the art that they've created and the songs that they've learned as part of building that love of reading in the summer. So if you ever want to see that at work, you just need to attend the showcase in the summer for Gaining Ground. Reading Partners also does Booked Up for Summer every summer. And so every student who has participated in our program during the school year receives a new backpack and 5 or 6 brand new books that are on their level and, as Lisa said, very culturally relevant to their experience, their traditions, their religious background. They see themselves in those texts. And then we also try to incentivize them with information about the summer reading program at the library and give them free tickets to FC Tulsa games and Drillers games, and so that they'll know that all the community is invested in their reading in the summer. And then at Reading Partners, we also have Take Reading With You. So every time a student comes to the Reading Center, as long as they've completed their lesson for the day, they have the opportunity to take a book home to continue to build their home library, because we agree that's such an important thing. And students love to read to their younger siblings and practice that way, and read to their parents. Maybe their parents' first language isn't English, or maybe they had a challenge in school, and that just allows the student to participate in creating literacy for their family. The other thing that I've talked to families about is some of us have the privilege of having had someone who loves us read to us when we're little, and it could be a parent, a grandparent, someone, and building that, just your endorphins connected to reading is a very easy thing for people to do. Like, I feel loved and I'm with a book. That's an easy thing for families and friends to pour into young children. And then also just emphasizing that books are wonderful. Screens have their place, but holding a book in your hand, seeing the illustrations, seeing yourself represented, you can't really duplicate that on a screen. And Reading Partners this year partnered with My Brother's Keeper to put libraries into North Tulsa barbershops. And in the same way that Lisa was talking about incentivizing with prizes and things like that, students who come into the barbershops and read, they get prizes for reading, and then the barbers ask them a lot of questions about the books so that they know that the barber's also thinking what they're doing is really important. And then we have a drawing quarterly, and they can win a bike and things like that. Amazing. So just, again, embedding the work in our normal lives.
Yeah.
We just don't see people reading like we used to when we were young. You see people on their devices. But if kids see how fun it is to read, what are you reading? And tell me about what you're reading. And the barbers are asking them those questions too. That just it inspires them to lean into that.
Yeah, and I remember when I was younger loving any kind of reading challenge, whether it was the library or was it Pizza Hut that you read you got personal pizza. I used to always love those. I probably would have read anyways, but I know I read more books because of those types of programs.
Yeah, you get a kid who's competitive. You're like, and then a challenge. You're like, I'm gonna meet the challenge.
Yeah.
I think so many of the kids that we see, and we in our program, after school programming, we have almost 700 kiddos a year go through our literacy programming. And what we find is the kiddos that we serve don't love reading.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had so many kids every single summer come on the bus in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I can't read. And so we immediately, all of us, jump into action. We're all certified teachers on the bus. And it's like, yes, you can. Let's just look at the pictures first. And we get a dog man, or we get a Captain Underpants, or we get something that you can read the pictures. And so these kiddos, all the way up to 4th grade, have not believed in themselves, have not had the opportunity for anyone to say, yes, you can read. You might not read in the conventional sense, but you can understand. And so if we can turn a kiddo around and all of a sudden get them excited about getting the next dog man, even though they couldn't read most of the words, that is a win. And that kid will then grow eventually to be a reader. And so it's that individual excitement, it's that collective family excitement, it's that school excitement. All of it plays in to growing the readers that we need for a literate community.
We're in Oklahoma. And if we look at other states, so there are other states that pay teachers more. Sorry, you have to do the calculation of like living expenses, blah, blah, blah. But is there a state whose model sort of works that Oklahoma could look at as far as like, one, how do we retain teachers, get skilled teachers? And then I guess on the flip side is how do we fund our education system enough where there's not 35 kids in a class?
Change the tax code?
Yes. Tax code. Like, is there a state that's doing it well, I guess?
There are states that certainly have a lot greater success than we do, but I like to point to Mississippi in the last decade and the changes that they've made. It's referenced as the Mississippi Miracle in certain places, but they really just came together as a state and said, we're not going to do this in bits and fits and starts. We're going to all come together as an education community in the state and think critically about how we can help every student. And they've made great progress because they aligned themselves around the importance of literacy, and they all agreed to do it. And so, of course, paying teachers a professional wage for the work that they do is paramount, but so is just getting the entire system on board with how important literacy is and that there are things that work for students. And sometimes we need to blow things up and rebuild them to make them serve students well. And so Mississippi has done some really great things in the last 10 years to not be in the bottom anymore. And we are still very much in the bottom. So I think there are some models we could look to and not maybe do wholesale, but Massachusetts has incredible education, but we could really dig in. And Lisa and I have talked a lot about building a literacy coalition of people who really care about this work coming together, bringing resources, bringing professionals in to help us think just in a new way about how to take what's working in other places and apply it in Oklahoma. What else would you say about other models? And
I think those states that truly adhere to the cap on classroom size makes a huge impact. And so we do not. I mean, at one point I've had 30 kids. Some of our kindergarten teachers have had 32 kindergartners all year long. And so I think that is a major issue. And if we need to look to other states to see what they're doing, but to see that, to make sure that we are capping classrooms, I think that would be the first step into creating a better education system in Oklahoma.
I feel like that's one of those things that even people who are not engaged in this topic at all can easily understand. Like a large classroom is hard to manage.
Yeah.
Like everyone's been in a classroom that was too big. I mean, like, I can just think of, this is a college example, but like my intro zoology was like 400 students. I was like, I had no engagement with that teacher at all.
Yep.
And like, you can't, especially in those early ages, you need to be able to connect to each individual student. And you can't, no one has that kind of energy, even me. I'm very energetic.
Yeah, I can imagine that teachers would end up spending most of their time focusing on we'll say somebody like Jesse.
Yeah,
who-
the
who
loudest
soaks up
ones.
the attention in
Yeah,
a room.
I feel bad for all those other students in all my elementary school classes because the teacher.
Yes.
That's why I got sent to the hallway so the teacher could teach the rest of the class.
But I can imagine that the teacher would end up having to focus most of their time on, the edge cases, either the very top or the very bottom students, and the quiet middle would not get the attention and could, especially on the bottom end of that, easily fall behind because they're not getting that attention they would need.
The other thing that I've noticed recently I didn't notice it in the past, but also being a former classroom teacher, if you are a parent or a grandparent or even one of our volunteer tutors working one-on-one with a student, unless you're in an education setting where you can see what one fourth grader is able to do and what another one is really struggling in, everyone is going to, for the most part, assume my child is doing great. Because you don't have a teacher has a frame of reference to say, this is what some fourth graders are actually capable of doing. And this is how much I think this person could grow to get there. So everyone, of course, assumes my child is learning. My child is not everyone, but for the most part, that's our hope for our children, that they're doing well and if they're not a behavior challenge in the classroom and the teacher thinks they're wonderful and it's a big class, everyone's just going forward assuming that we're in good shape. And it is that smaller group or that more individualized attention, or having someone in your family who is very familiar with education to maybe say, oh, that child is going faster, or that child needs a little support in this area. And when you're in a big class, like you said, there's no way to differentiate and really figure out the individual things that children need to grow.
And to tie back to what you were talking about earlier with the challenges with literacy, is that people who are in a difficult home situation, maybe their parents are working multiple jobs, they don't spend a lot of time, those parents are not going to have the time or the energy to necessarily notice if their kid is falling behind. They're not going to have somebody at home who can spend a lot of extra time doing homework with them or reading with them that can really assess if they need extra help.
It's true.
I mean, like I'm not even 100% sure like what age each grade is supposed to be. So how am I supposed to know what level of reading they're supposed to be at, right?
And every child is unique too. So, and developmentally, I remember my daughter in first grade. I mean, I love to read, but in first grade, she was taking a little longer to get it than I thought she should. I was not trained as a first grade teacher. And then there was kind of a light bulb moment over the holiday break where all of a sudden she kind of took off. And so every child really is his or her own little reader. And some of them may have a cognitive hurdle to overcome. Some of them just got there at a different pace. And that's why we need every program we can possibly have and everyone engaged in the city, the whole city, to help kids be excited about reading and also to have some smaller group or individual support for whatever they need.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know Reading Partners model is 1-on-1 and Gaining Ground's model is about 1-on-5 to 8. And so we have no more than that many kiddos in our program for one teacher. And we use certified teachers from our partner schools. So we hire about 65 teachers in a year for our programming. But the small group is key and essential. And Olivia is right that every reader that sits in front of you needs something different. And so if you have a large class size and you have a prescriptive model of curriculum, which many districts do these days, it's not like everything, this one curriculum is going to work for all kids. You have to be trained in diagnosing. You have to be trained in identifying what key area is going to get the biggest growth out of this reader. And so these large class sizes, the lack of training, the changing curriculum, all of it is just impacting our reading achievement in Oklahoma.
So if we were going to start tomorrow on fixing this, what is the first thing we should try to do? Is it truly just like, is it like starting a state question about, thank you, a state question on capping classroom size? Would that be the smartest thing to do?
I could definitely get behind that.
I would be behind that. I also We do. The pay in Oklahoma is so low. My son, who did not have an education degree, and I had been teaching for 20 years, went to Texas and got alternatively certified and started at almost $10,000 more than I made. And so I think that is an issue. We are bleeding teachers out to other states, but I think honestly, what teachers want right now is respect. Mm-hmm. And there is just a huge lack of respect for public education right now. And so many of our teachers, of the 65 that we hire, many of them say the only reason they're staying in public education is to work with Gaining Ground, because it's a place of joy and fun. And so we need that inside the classroom walls, that joy and fun brought back in to the classroom to keep our teachers, to maintain high quality teachers. And I think that would go a long way to changing the course of what is happening in Oklahoma right now.
And also inspire our students now to see education as a wonderful career path for them that is full of joy. If I could teach, that's my favorite thing to do. That is not feasible for me as a single mom who's sending a child to college.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad. But there is incredible joy and amazing things that happen in a classroom. And when you're watching students' critical thinking come online, and they're building empathy because of what they're reading, and all of those things are such an incredible thing to have as your day-to-day job, that the more we can. There's so many parents who say, don't go into education. And we need to be a state where going into education is the dream job, because nothing else matters. If I don't learn as a child and get excited about school and pursue my schooling with enthusiasm, I won't be a lawyer, I won't be a doctor, I won't be any of those things. So everything, to Lisa's point, if we just respected the role of the people in those classrooms and leaders in those school buildings and what they're really doing for the future, and pay and training and just a spirit of respect, would go a long way.
And I think getting rid of certain elected and unelected state officials could also help with that, but we don't have to.
They know who they are. Well, it's one of those things where, and I feel like Oklahoma also has this issue in sort of the nonprofit world, which is like, because you care about something doesn't mean you should get paid less for it. Right. Just because you're trying to make the world better doesn't mean, there's almost like, well, you're not.
You're going to do it anyway.
You're going to do it anyway, so we're not going to pay you a lot. It's always frustrated me. And teachers should get paid a lot. Mm-hmm. They have hard jobs. They should be also held to high standards, but you can't hold someone to incredibly high standard and also not pay them well.
Yeah,
exactly.
People are motivated by things.
Right.
So on a maybe slightly less serious note, so what are some of the most popular books for the kids now that they're wanting to take home and read?
Graphic novels.
Okay.
I mean, by far are what most of our students choose, the Dog Man and even the I Survive series now has graphic novels, Smile, and all of those.
Are the Press Start books still popular?
They are.
Okay.
They are. They're not as popular on our bus. I will tell you, Pete the Cat is still big.
Yeah. I was going to say Pete the Cat.
Yeah, Pete the Cat is still up there. Narwhal is a huge.
The Bad Seed books are very
the Bad
popular.
Seed books are amazing.
They're so cute.
So yeah, I think it's a lot of the standards are still around. Gerald and Piggy, huge. Yes.
It's very funny when we pick a read aloud at Reading Partners, if we pick an Olivia the Pig book, because then I'm Olivia. That's very funny.
Of course.
So all the Olivia books are still funny, at least to read with me when they know that's my name. But I have students pick out Where the Wild Things Are all the time. I loved Where the Wild Things Are when I was little. So some things do not go out of fashion when you're a reader.
Well, I would say like the books that have very distinctive illustrations, I think help. I mean, Where the Wild Things Are is very unique in its sort of the way the book is presented to you. And so, I mean, I've always been, I read books now that don't have a lot of pictures, but like the pictures the ones we do have some really nice pictures, our fantasy novels, but I feel like a good children's book has both Like it has an engaging story and also is very visually fun to look at.
I'll tell you what goes off our bus very quickly is nonfiction. So
Yes.
kids love nonfiction, like all the National Geographic early readers.
Yeah.
But also, have you read the Who Would Win?
Yes.
Oh,
I've seen those.
Goodness, we cannot keep those on the bus. And
so what are those about?
it will compare two animals. My 5-year-old grandson loves them. So
Okay.
it might be a dinosaur and an alligator, and it goes
sounds
through
awesome.
all of the aspects of the dinosaur, and then they have a battle on the last page or the last 2 pages, and then it says who would have won at that time.
That is brilliant.
There used to be a TV show like that, but it'd be like who would win between like an ancient Spartan and like a modern special forces.
Yes,
thing.
I remember that. Yes,
Yeah.
very
That's-
similar.
That's cool.
But every child wants to learn about bugs and
Uh-huh.
dinosaurs
Mhm,
and
Spiders and
spiders.
snakes.
Yes.
And, yes.
I love how they found an engaging way to do nonfiction things, because that was always you're like, ugh, like I know I need to learn about this. I know it's interesting. It's just like the way it's being presented to me is not in the most interesting way, and that's a fun way of doing it. Like who'd win in a fight?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. No, that's a great way to do that.
Another thing that I have the privilege of being on a Discovery Lab education committee, and Discovery Lab has their field trips and their summer programming that's pretty consistent over time. So when you're in 4th grade, you're likely to get these lessons and things like that. So Reading Partners provided books across different levels in all of their weather, matter, things like that, and then provided them for the libraries where we have reading centers. And that was another way for us to say, oh, you got excited about this at the Discovery Lab. Now there are 3 books in the library that you can go straight to that are just for that thing. And so that's another way that we can engage the rest of the community, or Philbrook or Gilcrease, in different place, or the Gathering Place, to say, like, you learned this at this other place, and here are books that are available to you in your library, or even just a list that we could provide and partner with the library and things like that. And of course, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. There are just so many ways that we can work together, and we're all distributing books. Reach Out and Read distributes books from pediatricians, and there are a lot of good things happening in the city. But we just want to talk about it more and more, and make sure more and more people are involved in making it happen for kids.
Exactly.
So there's obviously now a lot of different ways to consume books, whether it's physical book, Kindle, but also audiobooks. Is there a place for audiobooks in learning literacy?
Yes, for me. I use them all the time.
Yeah.
I love a good audiobook. We do not use them in our programming. Back in my day when I was in school, we always had a tape and a book. And so we could read and listen at the same time. And I still think that's a great practice. But for us, it just doesn't fit into our programming. We have had the bags with the cassette tapes in it and the book on the bus, and those flew off the bus. So I assume they got used. But what about you?
I'm just thinking about, as a child, I had all of those, the 45 records and the books, and then the tapes and the books. And that, loving those and using those at home did not detract from my traditional reading. That was just a wonderful new way to engage with a story. And we also don't use audio, but especially for people who maybe learn differently, have a more auditory approach to learning. I often listen to things while I read them just to make sure I'm getting it. And so there are all kinds of ways for that to be effective. And if you're listening in the car to an audiobook, the same empathy that you're building when you're reading it in a paperback is also, like, it's not just the literacy itself, it's the humanness that comes with stories and narrative, and
you're still being surrounded by all of these the imagination and words and critical thinking and vocabulary. All of that still resonates with kiddos. And so I have nothing against them.
You can predict
at
what's
all.
going to happen. That's a wonderful skill for students to have when they're readers. Is what do you think is going to happen next? You can do that just as easily by listening to something.
Yeah, I had not thought about those in forever, but I had some of those, the books that had the little sleeve for the record in them, and you could play them while you read along.
Well, I've always imagined, maybe this exists now, but like a sort of interactive audiobook on like an iPad or whatever, where like it's like quasi animated, where it's using the pictures that are already in the book and just sort of like weaving them together while also like showing you the words while playing the words. And I feel like that would hit everybody. And I imagine, I know there's a lot of rights involved and whatnot, but like, I feel like that'd be a great way of, one, not having to constantly print books, but two, you be able to sort of tell which thing is most engaging to that individual student. So technology people listening, get on that. So.
Well, that's a really good, those tapes and all of those programs are a really great strategy for our English learners. So many times in a classroom, they would put kiddos with headsets, and so that they could look at the English words and listen to it so that they can be read to and get all of the vocabulary.
Well, and I did that when I was studying French in school too, to be on your headphones and see it and hear it. And so it's got a lot of history behind the efficacy of that.
I mean, I will say when you're trying to learn a language, you go like one of those language labs in college or whatever. Like, it's not the most entertaining or engaging things you're listening to, but they're funny in hindsight. But I feel like there's a way to teach people language in general in a much more engaging way, and we just haven't connected all those dots and all of the sort of the rights involved and whatnot into that sort of thing. But that'd be really fun. So
well, I don't have the background to know all of this, but it's fascinating when our students who come to Reading Partners speak Spanish in their homes, and then they're learning English in the school setting. It doesn't matter what language was your original language. You have literacy skills. It's just a matter of translating that skill to the new language. And so that's fascinating to watch students who we might assume, because their home language is not English, that they're going to have a harder time, when in reality, they have developed skills in their home language that translate beautifully. And it's just a vehicle to then learn English. What have you seen in that?
No, that is exactly right. That we're not teaching them to read, because they are readers a lot of the time in their home language. We're just teaching them the English language.
Yeah. And we should be fair, like, English, not the easiest language to learn. Like,
it is not.
Other languages make a lot more logical sense than English does. And I mean, I remember this from Michelle telling me this, like, people who are speaking who speak a second language at home, there's a moment when it looks like they're falling behind in learning English, but actually then hit a point where they start going far above just English language learners, because they're connecting the dots in their head and actually become better readers if they're supported correctly during that short span where it looks like they might be falling behind.
That's exciting.
Exactly. And so many of our schools that you're in and Gaining Ground is in, I mean, the percentage of English learners is like 67, 70%. So when we talk about the classroom and training teachers and going back to some of those barriers, that is a barrier in itself if you're not trained to teach English learners. And just as a point of reference, it takes 5 years for an English learner to be a conversational in English, and it takes 7 to be academically proficient in the English language. So when we get our kiddos in kindergarten, we can't really expect academic excellence for many years.
Yeah.
And so I think that the lack of understanding that process is also a barrier in Oklahoma.
Agreed.
So you'd mentioned that in Mississippi, the whole community kind of came together and decided. So what are things that the community at large can do to not only support your organizations, but literacy in general?
Well, one thing that Reading Partners does is recruit volunteers to do that work. And this year, our goal is to serve 1,000 students in TPS and Union. And we can only do that if we have, in our model, if we have volunteers from the community. So it is not asking people to volunteer to dig a ditch in the rain. It is asking people to give about an hour of their week to a student who will enjoy every moment of that. Now, is every single session the easiest? And no, because children are involved. But children are fantastic, and they will grow, and they will respond to that investment. And they'll become stronger readers. So it really is an easy way to volunteer if you're drawn to volunteering in the community to help a student learn to be a stronger reader. And of course, I would say also I'm part of Educate 918, which is a group of TPS and City Year and Teach for America who are really trying to encourage more people to go into the profession. And so sometimes an entry point as an AmeriCorps member or as a volunteer, you fall in love with that school, you fall in love with that staff, you fall in love with those students, and then you're drawn into education as a career. And I think that's a very good way for people to take baby steps into education.
I like the volunteer idea. I think that to give people a really good view of education and what happens in schools, go volunteer. Find your local elementary school. And if they don't have a reading partners and you can't go through reading partners, then go read to kids. I mean, most schools will sign you up to volunteer. So that's one way. I think that Olivia and I, like she has said, we're on, I think, a mission to educate people about the current state of education in Oklahoma. And they need to find out for themselves because there's an assumption of what goes on in schools. They need to go on in and see the love and the passion and everything that is poured into every single kiddo in school. They need to see it themselves. And if you want to volunteer outside of the school day, they can always go on our website and volunteer for us as well. We do book bus volunteers. We need volunteers in our programming. And so there's all sorts of ways people could get involved.
And I will say, Jesse and I both volunteered for reading partners, and going in, I can understand it can feel a little scary, but you do get all the training and support that you need. And there's somebody in the room with you at all times that can help you if you have questions, or let's say that maybe you struggle if a disciplinary situation comes up, you're not responsible for disciplining a child. So even if you're a little scared, you have the support that you need to be able to volunteer.
Well, the other thing that on our mission is for people to just talk more about this issue, talk about our students and our families with all that they bring and all their potential and all the future that the future that is in front of them in our community. And a lot of times, not only are we deficit-minded when we talk about education and teaching, but we're deficit-minded when we talk about students and families. And that is not what we're about. We know that there's assets across every home in our community, and reading and supporting education is a way to draw attention to that and bring us closer together. And everyone can do something. You can donate books. You can donate to either of our organizations. You can attend an event. You can just come and cheer students on at the showcase and make them know how important it is that they're willing to share what they've learned. So there's so many ways to get engaged. And I just don't want anyone in our community to think that they can't have a role in the work, and that we shouldn't all be talking about it with our elected officials all the time and sending emails and just encouraging not to fight about education, but just to change the way we think about education and the way we think about our students and all that they can be.
And so many times you're in a conversation and the question is asked, what's wrong with education? And one of the things that often comes up is lack of family engagement. And it is a deficit mindset. It is, we have to reframe what family engagement or caregiver engagement looks like. It isn't them joining the PTA, and it's not coming to events. It is them being engaged with their children in their home. And through support with other organizations, we provide resources for families. Reading Partners the same. But that is family engagement. And there is not a family that I have ever dealt with in all 700 kids we've had that didn't want to be involved. It is a misnomer. It just isn't true that families don't want to be engaged. They do, and they are. And we just have to honor and respect the ways that they can be engaged.
Agreed.
Well, you pretty much hit the thing we normally ask people at the end.
The only thing I was going to add is just how can people connect with your organizations, and if needed, how can they give you money?
That's just go to gaininggroundliteracy.org. There's a place to donate. There's a place to volunteer. You can learn more about our organization. We're very small, a very small organization. We have 3 full-time employees. And so we do all of this with just the teachers that we hire and some of the volunteers. So please go on and donate or just give us a shout
merch.
Yeah,
I see you've got some merch.
We got some merch.
Jesse loves merch.
I love a t-shirt.
That's
So.
right. We have some good t-shirts.
It's great. You can volunteer and donate at www.readingpartners.org. It will, even though that's the national website, you can click on the region, and Tulsa's the region, and learn more about volunteering. And of course, donations. We are a larger organization. We have 14 full-time staff, and then we're an AmeriCorps organization. So that's another way that people can get involved. Maybe someone's taking a gap year after high school, or maybe between college graduation and graduate school or something like that. You really want to learn about maybe, is education something I want to do? There's a living stipend. There are scholarships to be earned. And so it's a way to pour into the school and serve and really take an opportunity to find out if that's something that you want to do. Maybe you want to become a literacy specialist and really pour in that work into the school. AmeriCorps is another way to get involved and do that.
Well, Lisa, Olivia, thank you so much for joining us today. This was fascinating. And I hope that when people listen, they go and, one, give money, and two, volunteer their time. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
This was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for listening to our episode with Olivia and Lisa. Information about both of their organizations are in our show notes. They are both great organizations to volunteer for. Please go help them, give them money, do all the things. As far as Pod for Good's concerned, please make sure to follow Pod for Good on whatever social media network you are okay currently being on, depending on your feelings that day. But you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, share with a friend, or, just tell someone on the street. We really don't care how you share it, as long as you share. As always, Tulsa, get it done. Broken Arrow, I got my eye on you. Be kind to one another out there. Hi, you're listening to a Pod for Good Media Network podcast. We are a network that provides podcasting production services and a supportive community in which podcasters can thrive. If you're a podcaster local in the Tulsa area, we would love to have your show on the network. If you are interested in starting one, we would love to help you get started. Find us online at podforgoodmedia.com and fill out our Pod With Us form. Happy podcasting.